And you're welcome along to the polling station. Rishi Sunak is the new Prime Minister. He's about to meet the King, but that hasn't been the only thing that's happened in recent weeks. Paul Krishnamurty is desperately trying not to spend a fortune on data because he's in Turkey because his time in Greece basically ran out because of Brexit. So he's on the way back to the UK, but he's taking a little holiday in Turkey. But the main news is that William Kedjanyi was a TV sensation over the last few days, appearing on TVs across Europe, Ireland, France, the UK, looking resplendent and supporting the Star Sports brand, William.
Very, very kind there. Yes, I've been on a few TV screens, which has always been nice. The board that's adored, not my nickname for the whiteboard, has been getting out and about. And yeah, it's been a very busy week, very hectic. Lots of the big market moves people all love. And of course, it's not really stopping here, but I think this is a good point to take stock because we finally got a third Prime Minister within, well, frankly, a very short space of time, I think about 6-7 weeks.
Yeah, he's possibly the wealthiest MP in Parliament, certainly one of the wealthiest. He, like the Irish Premier, has Indian heritage as well. So we have Indian heritage Prime Ministers in Ireland and Britain. I think we might get a bit of stability, though. Paul, I did say this to you when Liz Truss got the job. How did that go?
I don't think we said necessarily we should bring stability. I said she might just fare a little bit better than Boris Johnson would. I do think that Sunak will bring stability to the Conservative Party. I think the markets will love him, and there's some evidence of that already. And from that point of view, I suppose he's the logical choice. That's what made him the logical choice. I don't think that any of the deep-seated problems in Britain will be solved at all, right? But they wouldn't be under any Conservative leader, I don't think. But I think that he will certainly, I think that there's a good chance the economy will stabilise. There's actually a lot of other factors in play here. Like I read that the price of gas is about to fall off a cliff thanks to the storage of LNG across Europe. And that's going to help the economy dramatically and help inflation dramatically next year. So Sunak's probably got a reasonable start in front of him. I think that he will stabilise the Conservative position. I think there's a mountain to climb, and the Conservative Party have done themselves so much damage this year that it's probably irreparable. But I think that in the short term, at least, he's probably got a chance he'll get a honeymoon.
Yeah, we'll talk about the future and what the next few years have in store shortly. But just William, we recorded Trader Chat on Monday, Johnny Ward and Flynn Goward as ever, and spoke of quite a big bet taken by Star Sports that Boris would not get the job at 2's on. So he was obviously well fancied to get it when he was effectively hovering around 6-4 to be back at the helm.
Yeah, he touched joint favouritism at one point, and even then I was surprised he didn't go favourite when he was the one with the momentum behind him, when he was picking up quite a lot of public supporters. But they stalled around 50 to 60 or so. And then we had the infamous briefings from his campaign that they had the numbers, but they went to a different school, etc. So Westminster was told he had the numbers. The exchanges had a rather different story. It was at that point that we laid a very large wager of Boris not being the winner of the contest, and the momentum began to ebb away. And then I think the really key interventions came from the likes of Lord Frost and Charles Moore especially, and MPs like Braverman, key levers, saying quite rightly, I think that it's not the right time for him to come back. And it became a narrative of he's going to make it, he's going to do the Cincinnatus comeback to how does he sell this as a narrative of they could have had me, but I decided to stand aside for the good of the country, which is essentially what his statement said. And by that point, he drifted out quite markedly. So yeah, a real betting roller coaster because we'd laid all three of the candidates at some stage. Mordaunt initially was the one for money, then it was Johnson, and then Sunak was coronated.
Do you agree with Paul that the brand is irreparably damaged, or how badly is it damaged? This is an opinion that I've seen expressed a lot now, that the Conservatives, their polling is horrendously bad. It will recover a little bit under Sunak, but, would you give the Conservatives much chance, for example, to win the next election?
I do agree. I think a lot of damage done is permanent. And a scary thought for Conservative planners is that whilst the low natural gas prices, or the lowering natural gas prices are probably good and healthy, and the market response is also good and healthy, there are a lot of long-term structural problems that are going to become much worse over the winter. Mortgages will be one of those. Some people will unavoidably have those costs go up. Fuel bills as well. I think we can't forget there is a 6-month guarantee package. It will help, but I don't think it was very well understood or sold under Truss. I think some people were in for a rather nasty shock under Sunak as well. And then you had the issue of the big fiscal budgets, the big hole in the fiscal budgets. Jeremy Hunt, who may or may not remain as Chancellor, was basically having to make some very difficult decisions. The entirety of that budget's been reversed. What does Sunak do with it? One presumes there is a form of austerity coming, and the UK is not as well placed to handle austerity as it was in 2010. And that might sound offensive to some people, so I just want to qualify that remark. Basically, in 2010, we had much lower interest rates, much more resilience economically for that thing. And now people just are not really in the right space to handle it. I mean, will benefits go up by lining inflation was set to become a confidence issue for the Truss government. What will Sunak do about it? I think is one of the big first tests for him.
What sort of unity will he be able to kind of foster there, Paul? Because it's obviously been so fractured. He sort of was aligned away from the Boris angle himself, and obviously lost out to Truss, and then it looked like he might lose to Boris, but he didn't. He beat Penny Mordaunt. And is he going to be a unifying figure? Will he be able to get some structure back into a party that's obviously been so fractured?
It's a very good question. It's a known unknown. I don't think it will be quite as bad as has been hyped up. I think that a lot of the issues that supposedly horrified Tory MPs and made them rebel against Truss, like benefits, rising inflation, they're just phony, right? Conservative MPs do not care about benefits rising with inflation. I just don't buy it. I don't buy it that people who supported austerity 10 years ago, 12 years ago, massive cuts to disability benefits, massive private contractors all over the NHS and other public services, right? I just don't believe they care about any of that. And so Sunak will be able to keep those people, Tory MPs, most of them on board with austerity. Sure, there are some Nadine Dorrises and Christopher Chopes who are at war with Sunak because of what happened to Boris Johnson, or whatever other reasons. I'm not really convinced they will have a big issue. Where we could have an issue, the one issue that could be, is defence spending. You know, the Tories are full of people who firmly believe in defence spending, who are ex-military, etc. And the fact that Sunak apparently wouldn't give that guarantee during negotiations over the weekend is shocking. And I've always thought that he would not support the Ukrainians in the same way that Boris Johnson was prepared to and Truss was prepared to. So that could be a sticking point moving forward. But again, that probably depends on what happens elsewhere in the world, like at the midterms, for instance.
The challenges that he faces, really, I mean, from an Irish perspective, the protocol has been mentioned. Obviously, the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, is his biggest problem just to get the Conservatives actually back to a position where, I mean, Labour is now 4-9 to win the most seats and only 6-5 to get an overall majority at the next election. I think I read an article in the Irish Times Saturday by Pat Lee where he was saying that whether or not Keir Starmer wants to admit this, the only way for him to effectively get Labour to where it wants to be was to appeal to the centre-right. And there was, this is where politics is in Britain at the moment. And it does make me wonder, is it so flimsy in terms of people's choices that the Conservatives, if he does a steady job, actually, because Labour is so deeply unimpressive itself, all may be not lost?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the amount of ground he has to make up, I mean, let's not understate the challenge here from a polling perspective. Labour are literally 30 points ahead. I remember we used to joke on this podcast that any other leader, but Keir Starmer, should be 20 points ahead. He's now 30, and that's not one outlier poll, that's the average. I think Sunak probably has the ability to naturally bounce to maybe, he can take 10 points off that, I think. I think some parts of that lead are not rock solid, but the problem is that the underlying numbers, including a lot of direct switches, are going to take a lot of hard work and good fortune to turn back. So, I mean, we have cut the Conservatives in the markets in the next election. We have increased the chance of them holding on to some sort of hung parliament. You know, they're now 7-4 to win most seats in the next election, from a high of 9-4. You know, a no majority or a hung parliament is now 5-4. You know, we've increased the chance of there being a general election quite late. It's now 7-2 on. But here's the thing. He will do well, based on current trends, to stop something like an 8-point loss or whatever. But when all is said and done, and that has the Conservatives very much teetering out of office. And not to mention, of course, there's the fatigue. We've had 12 years of Conservative government, and frankly, there hasn't been any stability really for the last 4 to 5 years of it.
2 to 7 the next election.
To add as well. So
Yeah,
just
go
to add
ahead,
one
Paul.
point as well. Right? Let's not underestimate the potential for a right-wing splinter party here. You know, one thing that Boris Johnson did was he united all of those little factions on the right, the BNP, the UKIP, the English Democrats, all of those parties more or less imploded under Boris Johnson, right? And that's how he got to 43%. There was always a large number of people against Boris Johnson. And I think that the anti-Tory alliance, so to speak, is firmer than ever, and that's not going to weaken, right? On the other hand, I can see the likes of Nigel Farage absolutely making hay against Sunak, and it just seems very hard to see how there isn't going to be some kind of splinter that takes 5-7%, and that puts them in a horrific position all over the country. You know, it can't be underestimated that the way that the Conservatives have positioned themselves in recent years makes it imperative that they hold that right-wing coalition together. And I'm not sure they can.
To paraphrase Lionel Hudson, The Simpsons, if there's one thing Britain needs, it's another right-wing party. Do you think that this could be, if not terminal, for the Conservatives? I mean, politics is so mad. We live in extraordinary times. Do you think, Paul, that is it possible that the Conservative brand is so damaged that this is the beginning of the end of the party in terms of where it's been in Britain?
It might well be. It might also be that they simply go down the same route as the Republicans, right?
Fascist.
And this is the future. Yeah, fascist. This is the future of right-wing politics. I mean, I noticed Dominic Cummings has been. He actually tweeted Betfair the other day asking for a market on a referendum on the European Convention of Human Rights, and I've no doubt that that's coming. And he's been talking for weeks about
Will he get on?
I'm not on anything yet, but that's the next binary. That human rights, you know, the rights of workers and immigrants is definitely the next binary choice in Britain. That's going to be there to divide the population. And he's been saying for weeks that we need to, you know, blow up the Conservative Party and create something new. And I know exactly what he means. He means MAGA. He means MAGA. He means the Brothers of Italy. He means the National Founding Fathers from the Purge, right? That's the agenda that Dominic Cummings and his people have. And it is quite hard at the moment, given the way the information ecosystem is, that isn't the future of the right wing. And therefore, you know, from Starmer's point of view, from the Lib Dems' point of view, it's a no-brainer to just park your tanks on their lawn, be a sort of centre-right and, you know, solid, and don't scare the middle class, don't scare Middle England territory.
Yeah, and Obviously, I've just finished this England on Sky Atlantic. Dominic Cummings does not emerge as a particularly savoury character if you watch it. Strangely enough, Boris Johnson actually comes across quite well in what I think otherwise was an amazing piece of TV. But just, that was Britain's response to COVID was initially quite questionable, I think, William, and then sort of seemed to kind of get it right after got in all the vaccines and all that. But as a young Briton, how ashamed are you of the country standing globally now over the past, I don't know, since Boris's reign really into Liz Truss? And I know Ireland is far from perfect, but I think Britain's a bit of a laughingstock at the moment.
Yeah, it's been quite something to see all of these acts of buffoonery. It's the kindest way I can put it, across so many years. I mean, there have been a lot of lows, and I do think we'll look back in further history. I think we can already look back now and think, oh God, what was going on there? But I do think, a few years down the line, historians won't write about this period very favourably at all. And it's been quite an edifying spectacle to see a lot of the way, or sort of a lot of the decisions taken, but also the way the decisions have been made. And I definitely think there is ground for Sunak to sort of at least do a little bit of party imaging by basically not being a giant moron. And by having the Conservative Party basically be a bit quieter and show much less of their buffoonery, I have to say. It's because some of the stuff we see has just been absolutely remarkable. I mean, just last week, we literally had Wetherspoons fight in the voting lobbies in the House of Commons, and it doesn't reflect well on us at all.
Yeah, and the question, just before we wrap up, Paul, the question of Scottish independence. Now, what does this mean? We have a Brexiteer in charge now, and the standing of the UK, I think the UK is potentially on the verge of sort of falling apart into the nationalist England. Maybe the vote for Brexit in the first place. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm not convinced Scottish independence will ever happen. It's
Right.
too much of a risk. It's too much of a risk. And I mean, I say this as someone who has every empathy with Scottish people who want to live in a progressive country and are sick of being ruled by Little England, so to speak, right? Brexiteer England. I completely sympathise with that. But once you get into the detail of it, Skexit would be an absolute nightmare. It would make Brexit look like a picnic. We would just fight and fight over the details for years to come, particularly the nuclear deterrent, right? And personally, I'm a fervent supporter of that. It makes me alienate most other lefties, but I'm a fervent supporter of that with all the problems and threats there are in the world. So I just think that staying with the union will always be the better the devil you know, the safe choice. And I think that, that what you'll probably see is after the next election, I think there's probably a 75% plus chance you will see a Keir Starmer-led government, whether a majority or a coalition. And in that environment, our relationship with Europe will get better. A lot of these socially conservative far-right things will be put on the back burner for a little while. And that may well be a long road back to the centre ground, but I think there's a good chance that we'll get there, but it won't happen until the Conservatives are out of power.
Yeah, we're going to finally turn away from Britain next week with 2 weeks or so to the US election, so we're going to focus on that next week. But last word to you, William Kedjanyi, and may I say, Britain's demise has done wonders for your profile.
Yeah, you're flattering me, John. You really are. I mean, if I can have a last word, there are a lot of people to thank because it has been very, very hectic covering this period, as well as you guys, David Stewart and Joe Citroni, two of the other content geniuses at Star, myself firmly not included in that, who have done an absolutely brilliant job covering for me whilst I've been here, there and everywhere, including the party conference seasons. And a big shout out to Ben Keith for all the support and the help. Along with him as well, Russ Candler, our MD, who has sort of overseen the Good Ship Star. So just big thanks to them as well. And of course, family Kedjanyi, who have been very, very supportive. And also to everybody who's watched, interacted with something, come to say hi, been interviewed, including all the MPs who have given us their time. And last but not least, you guys for watching it and interacting with it all. I really couldn't be more thankful. It's an absolute privilege and honour. And I dare say we are only just at the beginning, because if things do calm down and we only have the small matter of a budget essentially next week, of course we got the US midterms, for which our prices are already up. We're seeing Republicans surge in the polling. Paul's got a couple of new bits out, new shows which are excellent for catching up on that. But I'm sure this time next week we'll see more changes, because Nancy Pelosi is heading across the country, and Biden and Obama, I think, are hitting the ground for Fetterman in Pennsylvania.
Actually, yeah, we'll give you the last word, Paul, just to plug your new media as well, which we're all rather excited about.
Yeah. So we're doing a weekly show. It's called Get Out the Bet. Got some links on my Twitter. Focus primarily on, it's entirely about political betting. It's focused primarily on US betting, so there'll be a lot on the midterms next, but we'll also be covering the big elections around the world.
And if Paul did cut out there, that's blame Turkey, and it's always somebody else's fault. He's slightly dodgy Wi-Fi today as he bids to return to Britain. But check out his Twitter page for all the links, and thanks for watching the polling station.